Okay, here we go. Well, I will first turn it over to Regina to introduce the evening.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this very exciting program. Exciting because this is the first time in this area, other than when Amy came to interview here, that people in the community are getting to meet Dr. Amy Weiss, who is the new director of the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. And she'll be a professor, assistant professor at the university, and the director of the Museum of Jewish Civilization. And we are really delighted to have Amy joining us. It has been I don't want to say really a slow entry, but you know, the pandemic has certainly taken its toll on a variety of things, but it wasn't really the pandemic that delayed Amy from coming to the area. Because Amy this semester has been a Katz Center Fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. And what is different for her was this was supposed to be a 4-day-a-week in residence fellowship, and you know what happens to things like that. So we are delighted to have Amy here to do a presentation on American Jews and Holocaust memory, American responses to the Holocaust. Amy comes to us most directly from this fellowship, but she was at the university. She came here from St. Elizabeth University in New Jersey, where she directed the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Education. And she is very experienced, has written a lot already. She got her PhD from the Departments of Hebrew and Judaic Studies and History at NYU, and has directed museums, has done community presentations, has presented at conferences. She's published in the journals American Jewish History, Holocaust and Genocide Studies, and Israel Studies, and has quite an impressive vita. So I would like to make sure that Amy gets most of the time this evening to do her presentation. There will be time for Q&A. If you have questions, save them to put in the chat. You can enter them into the chat as the presentation goes on, and you can certainly add questions to the chat at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I would like to present Amy Weiss.
Thank you, Regina. It's so great to be here virtually. And Kim, I'd also like to thank you and Avi for putting together this program. I see some familiar names and faces. I see Arnold Greenberg. I see Susan Gottlieb from the Judaic Studies Center. I also see Dean Catherine Black, and it looks like my colleague Seth Altman is also joining us. Seth and I were colleagues together at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum when we were part of the CHEC program, the Conference for Holocaust Education Centers, and that's actually where I met Kim as well. So it's good to see everyone, as well as the Greenberg Center Advisory Board. And it looks like I'm also seeing some of the members. I teach an adult education Jewish short story class, so it looks like I'm also seeing some of the participants from that. So good to see everyone, and thank you so much for coming. Like Regina mentioned, I am currently on fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania working on a book project. The book project deals with American Jewish and evangelical relations, looking at basically how do we get to where we are today with the relationship between Jews, evangelicals, questions about Israel, questions about American domestic policy. And it was supposed to be in Philadelphia, but right, with 2020, you don't always get what you expect. So I've been doing a lot of remote work. I'm still, I don't think I'm an expert in Zoom, but I definitely have a lot of experience on that end. So this topic, American Jews and the Holocaust, especially talking about Holocaust memory, there's so much to say. And when I was thinking about this topic and what I wanted to talk about and what I thought would be really ripe for discussion were two particular areas, looking at the decade right after World War II, and then looking at the past decade currently. So essentially having these two bookends of 1944, 1945 to the 1950s, and then looking at the last decade. And there are a couple of reasons why I selected these two bookends, right? We could spend hours, if not more than that, talking about American Jews and Holocaust memory. But oftentimes I think that these first few years after what becomes known as the Holocaust are often overlooked for later periods and later ways that Jews and Americans in general have remembered the Holocaust. So I thought it would be useful for us, and especially if there are some educators on the Zoom call, to think about ways that you can incorporate these different moments into your teaching. And also for those of you who are not educators, to think about how American Jews in the months, the years right after the Holocaust, how are they processing what's going on? Do they have family members that survived, that died? What do they know? How are they thinking about this? And I also highlight this time period because there is a consensus among historians, among some American Jews, that American Jews never talked about the Holocaust, that it was a taboo topic, and it was only until in the 1960s with the capture and trial of Adolf Eichmann, with the 1967 Arab-Israeli War, when American Jews felt comfortable talking about the Holocaust. And so there have been historians, notably Hasia Diner from New York University, who's really delved into this topic and shown that this idea actually isn't true, that American Jews have always talked about the Holocaust. So I thought it would be useful to further bring those topics to light. And then we're living in this contemporary moment, and at a time when Holocaust survivors are aging, there's going to be a time when Holocaust survivors are no longer alive. And then the question is, how do Jews remember the Holocaust without survivors, right? It's going into this different phase. And I think this is something that I'd like to discuss with you as to what is this next phase and what lessons perhaps can we learn from the past to inform the present. So that's just an overview. Basically, like I said, bookends, the first decade after the Holocaust, and then decades later in the 2010s. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see my screen. Okay, Kim is nodding, so that's a good sign. So here I thought one of the first ways to think about Holocaust memory and American Jews remembering the Holocaust is actually before the period even ends. There's this wonderful edited volume. It's called Jewish Youth at War, Letters from American Soldiers. And it takes the letters from 93 men and women who were attached to the United States military, and it compiles these amazing letters home. And so this photo, it's a little grainy, but this is how it appears in the text itself. And this is the information we're given about Harry Kulkowitz. So he's from New York, And he writes, the volume includes a few letters from him, from Luxembourg, right, from Belgium, from various places in Europe. And we're told, this is the information that we're given about him. It's very sparse, but we're told that he enlisted on October 9th, 1942, and that he was younger than 18 when he enlisted. So the suggestion is that he lied about his age so that he could enlist earlier. And we're also told that his parents came to the United States from Poland in 1920, and his father was a tailor. Now, I also, before we look at this one letter of his that he wrote, because I think it's telling about how American soldiers abroad are understanding what they're experiencing relating to the Holocaust, and then how that information is being translated back to the United States. But this is what, in the foreword to the collection, this is what the editor, Isaac Raunch, tells us about these soldiers. And this is a quote, that practically all of the letter writers are the children of Jewish immigrants. Their parents became Americans by choice. The children brought up in these homes were able to appreciate the significance of America to all who have known persecution because of creed, race, or political convictions. The American Jewish soldier fights as an American and as a Jew. He knows the Nazi threat to America. He knows that Nazis murdered his relatives in the death chambers of Lublin and Majdanek. So here, this idea that even before you get to the letters, you're being told that these soldiers are Americans and Jews, right? There's this real emphasis on that they are very much, right, this 100% American. And not only are they understanding the war through that lens, but as a Jewish lens as well. Okay, so here, so I just want to look at this letter that hopefully you can see, but I'll read some of the text just in case it's hard to see. Let's see. Okay, so Harry Kolkowitz, this is in 1944, writes home, and he says, "Dearest folks," and he explains why he hasn't written in a while, and he essentially explains that he's been on guard duty. And he writes a letter to his parents, letting them know that during guard duty, he's encountered a variety of Jews in Belgium. And one of the encounters he has, this isn't the entire letter, but this is some of it. He says a little boy of about 10 years old came up to us and timidly asked us, "Bist du ein Yid? Are you a Jew?" And he writes, well, it turned out that this was a Jewish kid who was trying to find some Jewish soldiers to take up to see his family. That evening, a few of us fellows went with him to see his family. Here's a remarkable thing about this family. They had come through the whole 4 years of war intact. Now, of course, right, this is 1944. So the whole 4 years talking about the 4 years prior. There are 4 people in the family. Like ours, there is the mother and father, and a boy of 10 and a girl of 15. The family had originally come from Warsaw in 1919. The father by trade was a stuffer of furniture and also made paddings for suits. When the Germans overran their country, the kid was put in a Catholic school by a patriot and given a different name. The daughter was taken by a Gentile family who posed her as their own daughter. Signed, your loving son, Harry. Now here, what I think is really usable about this letter, I mean, there are a lot of things that are usable, but this idea of how American Jews are remembering the Holocaust. Well, Harry Kolkowitz, what he's doing in his letter to his parents is he's already making connections between the family that he has met and his own. The idea that he is saying, there are 4 people in this family, just like there were 4 people in our own family. And like us, there's a daughter and there's a son, right? So he's already this idea of there's a connection here. He's never met this family, but yet as an American Jew, he sees something inherently that is connecting him to this other family. And also the fact that Harry's own father is a tailor and this boy's father stuffs furniture and also deals with suits. That is seen as another connection, right? This idea rather than it's them, this is a we, it's a collective. And so I see this letter as just a great example of how even before the Holocaust is over, American Jews are very much talking about the Holocaust, and they are trying to make sense of it, trying to tell others, right? And this is one of the things that for American soldiers, that about 550,000 American Jews fought in World War II. So this is about 11% of the American Jewish population, a percentage far outnumbering the actual percentage of American Jews at that time or any other time in American history. And so this experience for American Jews really shapes, I would say, American Jewish history, but also how they're understanding the Holocaust. So on the one hand, you have American Jews who oftentimes living in cities like New York and Chicago, they're interacting with individuals from all over the United States, many of whom have never encountered a Jew before. So although some of these interactions are tinged with anti-Semitism, it's an experience both for American Jews and non-Jews to meet and to learn about each other and to learn more about the United States and the diversity it has. But at the same time, these are also soldiers who are liberating concentration camps. So I see this as, when we think about American Holocaust memory, oftentimes this is a moment that we might not think about, but I think it's useful in classrooms, in our own discussions, to see about how men and women in the American military, what role they play in bringing the Holocaust back to the United States, right? We know that newsreels during the war and immediately after played a big role, but I think these letters home, this compilation of letters was published in 1945. So there was a call for letters that were sent home and from 1940 to 1944. And so based on that, thousands of letters were sorted through, and 93 individuals, their letters were chosen to be in this compilation. And so I thought that's just one example. And again, so I'm going to skip between different examples. So I'm not going to spend too much time at any one example, but rather I think this is useful to think about a variety of examples and what we can learn from them. So I wanted to move on to a different example, and this one is from 1952. So the American Jewish Congress, a national Jewish communal organization founded in 1918, tasked a committee with creating a ritual text to go along with text for a Passover Seder. And this is what the committee came up with. So on the left-hand side, you can see the entire text, both in Hebrew and in English. And because the text is a little small, I also have part of it copied on the right. Hopefully this is a little bit easier to read. And I just want to go through it again. I think these texts are so rich, both for teaching, but also for thinking about how we're American Jews commemorating and memorializing those that died in the Holocaust. And I should even say, if I haven't said this already, this idea, this term, the Holocaust, at this time, right? The idea that American Jews are understanding what is going on in real time. And the term that we use, Holocaust, as a blanket term to refer to the destruction of European Jewry, that wasn't necessarily the term that was collectively used. There were a variety of terms. The Hitler times, Hitler's Holocaust, in Yiddish, the Chorban, the Shoah in Hebrew. So different ways of understanding this. And so here, this became this Seder ritual of remembrance. We're told this is for the 6 million Jews who perished at the hands of the Nazis and for the heroes of the ghetto uprisings. So the idea, right, it's not saying that this is specifically for the Holocaust, but rather for the 6 million Jews, right? Oftentimes the 6 million Jews, or the Sharit HaPleita, right, the surviving remnant, that's also used. And so just to read a little bit of this text, that we're told on this night of the Seder, we remember with reverence and love the 6 millions of our people of the European exile who perished at the hands of a tyrant, more wicked than the Pharaoh, who enslaved our fathers in Egypt. Come, said he to his minions, let us cut them off from being a people, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. And they slew the blameless and pure, men and women and little ones, with vapors of poison and burned them with fire. But we abstain from dwelling on the deeds of the evil ones, lest we defame the image of God in which man was created. So here we have this first paragraph, right? This is a 3-paragraph document. And in this first paragraph, we're told that, right, we have this comparison that just like with the idea on Passover, that Jews should remember the Israelite exodus from Egypt as if they too were Israelites leaving Egypt. So too in this document, American Jews are tasked with remembering the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. So it's this combination of, right, during this Passover Seder, you're using part of the liturgy as a way of recalling the Holocaust. And then the second paragraph, now the remnants of our people who were left in the ghettos and camps of annihilation rose up against the wicked ones for the sanctification of the name and slew many of them before they died. On the first day of Passover, the remnants in the ghetto of Warsaw rose up against the adversary, even as in the days of Judah the Maccabee. They were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided, and they brought redemption to the name of Israel through all the world. Okay, right. So here we also have this connection to the Warsaw Ghetto. The idea that on the first day of Passover in 1943, there was this Warsaw Ghetto uprising. So again, a connection, a specific connection this time to an event taking place during World War II. And then lastly, we're told that and from the depths of their affliction, the martyrs lifted their voices in a song of faith in the coming of the Messiah, when justice and brotherhood will reign among men. And we have the words both in Hebrew and in English for Ani Ma'amin, I believe. And right, so we're told, I believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah, and though he tarry, nonetheless do I believe. So again, oftentimes Maimonides' 13 principles are said during morning prayers, but oftentimes they are recited during Passover, during Holocaust Remembrance Day. So this is another way, just one example of so many, to show how American Jews, and in this case, the American Jewish Committee, was finding ways, and in this case, during the holiday of Passover, to remember Jews. Okay. So here I want to, just to be clear, I want to move on to one other example, or one of a few other examples. And this one takes place in 1953, and it is an episode of This Is Your Life. So forgive me for a second if you're looking at a blank screen. I will share the video with you in a second, and I hope that it works. So let me know if it doesn't. But just to, actually, you know what? Here, let me play the video. I'll give you just a little bit of background. So This Is Your Life was a 30-minute television program. It aired in the 1950s, and each episode, an individual, oftentimes, most of the time, unknowingly, becomes the subject of the program, where individuals from their past are brought on and their life is showcased to the public. And it's very specific that the individuals who made this program want to see emotion, that they check with family and friends to make sure, is this person going to show emotion, to give the response that we want, right? If someone is stoic, that doesn't make for good television. So here we have one of the first times that national television is talking about a Jew who survived the Holocaust. But I'll say a little bit more about what's actually happening. But I want to show you this moment in the film, or this 30-minute video. We're only going to see about 2.5 minutes. So just to be clear about that. But I want you to see this moment when Hannah Block-Kohner is selected. Okay, so hopefully it will work. Let me know if it doesn't.
This is Your Life, television's most talked about program.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Oh, thank you, too, for being with us again on This Is Your Life. Well, we're all set to go here. Let's have a look around and see whom we have here at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood. Lovely lady down here, too. Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank
Good, that's fine. May I have your name, please?
Hannah Corner.
What is that?
Corner. Hannah Corner.
Hannah Koner, good. Oh, you're Mrs. Walter Koner, the wife of the Hollywood talent agent. Yes. Is Walter with you?
Uh-huh, yes.
Where is he?
Well, he just went out. He'll be right back.
Oh, he will. Okay. All right. Would you just read for us what it says on the cover of this book, Jeff?
This is your life, Hannah Black Koner.
Oh, no.
Yes. This is your life, Hannah Black Koner. That is what it says.
Oh, my God.
This has been quite a switch. You thought it would be the life of your good friend Jeff Hunter here, didn't you? Yes, you thought it'd be the movie star Jeff Hunter. Is that right, Hannah?
That's right.
No, we'll have to do him sometime, but tonight it's you. Let's get her up, Jeff. Stand up with her. Come on over here and take your place in our chair of honor, Hannah Black Koner. You richly deserve this place. Come on over here by me. Lean on me for support if you need to.
I hope you have a spare handkerchief.
Well, I have a spare handkerchief, and shall I give it to you now?
Well, that's my...
Well, as this is your life will prove, you richly deserve this. May I say, Mrs. Koner, that looking at you, it's hard to believe that during 7 short years of a still short life, you lived a lifetime of fear, terror, and tragedy. You look like a young American girl just out of college, not at all like a survivor of Hitler's cruel purge of German Jews. These, as well as happier events in your life, we will relive with you in just a moment. Hannah, you're really surprised, aren't you?
I'm a surprised. And I've seen that show so often, you know. I mean, how they fooled me.
It took quite a bit of fooling, but now you relax and let's hear the story. We're going back to the beginning, across the seas to Czechoslovakia. This is your life, Hannah Black Koner, in the little town of Teplitz-Schurnau.
Okay. So from this video, what we're getting, so what we didn't see is the individuals that are brought out. Okay, so I think, forgive me, we're going to just look at a black screen for a little bit, but hopefully you can see me, so there's some movement on the screen. But we have, so Hannah's life is played out before the audience, both in the theater and then at home. And what we're told in between video footage, in between photos, in between, right, and you could hear the dramatic music that's being played, that we're told that Hannah meets her current husband, Walter, when she is a teenager. And in the 1930s, Walter is able to get a visa to the United States. He leaves and he hopes to send for Hannah, but due to immigration restrictions in the United States, Hannah isn't able to come. And when the Germans invade Czechoslovakia, where Hannah is from, her and her family go to Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, this is where she meets her new husband, or I should say her husband, Karl Benjamin. Who's a German Jewish refugee. So he too has sought refuge in Amsterdam. And we're told that they're both arrested by the Gestapo in 1943, and she is sent to a variety of concentration camps. So during the 30 minutes of This Is Your Life, Hannah is reunited with a childhood friend from Czechoslovakia. She's reunited with a friend that she meets that she goes to several concentration camps with, an American Jewish soldier that she befriends after the war is also brought onto the stage. Someone that she lived with in Amsterdam after the war is brought out. Then her husband, who I should say, Karl unfortunately dies during the war along with her parents, but the American Jewish soldier that she meets happens to know Walter Kohner writes to him and says, you have to know that I've located Hannah. It's important for you to know. And he shows up. He shows up where Hannah is staying. And what we don't see also in the video is the host is asking the husband, so did you propose right away? And he responds saying, no, I waited a day, right? This idea, waiting a day, I don't know if that's waiting so much, but right, it's met with a lot of applause and laughter. And then also this is your life reconnects Hannah with her brother. Her brother, they're separated during the war. Her brother ends up in Israel and she hasn't seen him for almost a decade. So this program is bringing together her family who's scattered across the globe, but at the same time, it's doing so in a way that Hannah hasn't consented to this, that she's completely surprised by this, right? We can see from her reaction, no, it's not right, I hope you have an extra handkerchief. So I think that's important to note, that this is definitely a way that American Jews experience the Holocaust, and another way that Americans themselves understood the Holocaust. And it's so interesting, just like we saw in the foreword to the edited collection, where the editor says, these American Jewish soldiers were Americans who fought, right? That the host of this television program is also saying, Hannah looks just like an American right out of college, right? She doesn't look like what you would think of a survivor of the Holocaust. So all of these terms, I think it's just really telling of the narrative that's crafted around the Holocaust in the United States in the early period right after the war. But the fact that, right, this is a national television program. The program thought it was so important that they said that they were very careful saying, we want to have this without interruption, right? After saying that, they do cut away to a commercial for the sponsor of the show. But other than that, they are careful not to have advertisements as a way to really highlight that this is something unique to some of the other stories that they're telling. Okay, so I want to get rid of this black box on our screen. So let me move on to just one other example from the 1950s, and then we'll look at a bookend of what is going on in the past 10 years with American Jews and Holocaust remembrance. So here I have two images, and both of them relate to the B'nai B'rith Martyrs Forest. So just for some background, so B'nai B'rith, it's a fraternal organization founded in 1943 in New York by German Jewish immigrants. And in some ways, B'nai B'rith is founded because Jews were looking to join other fraternal orders, and due to concerns about anti-Semitism, they're not allowed in. So many Jews decide to start their own fraternal order. And I should add that it's been noted that B'nai B'rith is perhaps the first organization that started in the United States that then is exported to Europe, as opposed to starting in Europe as a Jewish organization and then exported to the United States. So it's early after the war, that in 1947, that B'nai B'rith, because they have lodges throughout the US, throughout Europe, they lose about 100,000 members. And together, collectively, this organization decides that they want to memorialize not only these 100,000 members who died, but they want to memorialize the 6 million Jews. So what they do is they partner with the Jewish National Fund, and they start building a forest. And here I think it's important to note that this isn't a forest that's established anywhere in Europe. It's not in the United States, that it's specifically, they're choosing the land of Israel to plant these trees. So there's a lot of symbolism, this idea that to choose the location that will become a Jewish state is very significant. That B'nai B'rith is saying that they see the future of Jews and Judaism in what becomes Israel. And this idea, right, so we can see in this, the image on the left, this is the entrance to the B'nai B'rith Martyrs Forest. And it's in the mid 1950s where the trees are actually planted. And then there's an entire fundraising campaign. So for $1.50, you can plant a tree in Israel. And what I think is really interesting is that that this becomes a planting site that tourist agencies have, because this forest is located just outside of Jerusalem, that, and there are many forests that the Jewish National Fund has created throughout the land of Israel, that, but its proximity to Israel, or excuse me, its proximity to Jerusalem is really important for Jewish, or not, or I should say tourist agencies, for Jews and non-Jews who are interested in planting trees, right? To have that experience of actually putting your hands in the soil, of knowing that they are planting, contributing, that this, right, this idea of being one with the land, so to speak, is very appealing to a certain segment of the population. And so the tourist agencies grab onto that and market the B'nai B'rith Martyrs Forest as a way for individuals to actually plant trees. So I know for, in some cases, tours that are going on in the late 20th and 21st century, there's also the same impetus to tour the land, to plant trees. So we're also seeing it here. And then just to look at this image on the right. So this is a little bit of a later addition to the B'nai B'rith Martyrs Forest. We're seeing the Scroll of Fire. This is sculpted by Nathan Rappaport, who is a Holocaust survivor. This is about, it's hard to tell from this image, but it's about 26 feet tall. And if you look at it, we could say that it looks like a Torah scroll, right? These two sides of the scroll. On the one hand, and this would be on the right side, we're seeing destruction. So destruction of Jews during the Holocaust. And then at the right, you can, if you see my arrow, it looks like there's a menorah, so perhaps hearkening back to the destruction of the temple during Roman times. And then that scroll on the left is representing independence. So again, this idea, right? So it's talking about the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, talking about this idea of the establishment of a Jewish state. Again, I think interesting that this idea of independence relating to Jews, it's talking about the land of Israel, which is an interesting statement to be making, given that where did the Holocaust take place? Who were these martyrs that B'nai B'rith was commemorating? They're from Europe. So again, a telling statement to not have this forest or this memorial be placed in Europe, right? And part of the question is, well, where do you have a memorial in Europe? Especially if you don't know where people are buried. So that was the question. But of course, right, we know that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of memorials in Europe, but I thought this was an interesting example of one way that American Jews looked outside of Europe to create a Holocaust memorial and to remember those who died. Okay, so I want to skip ahead. So just to be clear, we're jumping in time. So please take that leap with me into the 21st century. So I want to talk about two more contemporary ways that American Jews have remembered the Holocaust. Okay, so one of those would be something that's called New Dimensions in Testimony. It's developed by the USC Shoah Foundation. So originally started in 1994 as the Shoah Foundation by Steven Spielberg. It then joins with the University of Southern California, becoming the USC Shoah Foundation. And here it's this amazing technology where Holocaust survivors and then survivors of other genocides as well are interviewed. So there's actually a green screen behind them. They have a variety of cameras and there's a lot of lighting. And then they're asked several questions by an interviewer. In fact, up to 2,000 questions. And each answer is then recorded separately, because what this technology is doing is as you can see here, so this is a photo that's taken at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. So this is a traveling exhibit. It exists in several spaces. And so the individual who's standing is speaking into a microphone. The microphone is then taking the question, and it's essentially the technology. The question is acting as a search engine. It's hearing the keyword, and then almost instantaneously that keyword is programmed, and then an answer is given. So here we have two survivors, Eva Schloss and Pinkas Guter, and they are talking. And what I think is great about this particular exhibit, I've seen it in a variety of places. In some cases, it is on a television screen that's, rather than widthwise, it's lengthwise. But here it's almost that these individuals are life size. And I mention this as an example because I think it's relatively new, right? This is in, it was brought to the USC Shoah Foundation in 2010 by Conscious Display, an exhibitions development organization. So 2010, this idea is brought to the USC Shoah Foundation. 2014, they start doing these interviews. So here, like I mentioned, this is a way to think about how does one remember the Holocaust in the 21st century going forward, where survivors are unfortunately dying, and this question of Holocaust testimony plays a key role in how American Jews remember the Holocaust. Hearing from the individuals themselves, their experiences, right? That we saw Harry Kolkowitz. He interacts with his family and he sends, right, he connects with them, and then their experiences become part of his own experiences. He shares it with his family. And then his family, then I don't know the answer to this, but I assume that his family then also shares this information, right? They're getting a letter from their son. This is, did you get news? Did you get news? So they're sharing this news. And so this is a way also that you can't replace the interaction that you would have with a Holocaust survivor, but this is one way where you could do your best to mimic it. The fact that you can ask a question and then in almost real time get a response back that matches what you said, I think it's quite remarkable. So like I said, this is a traveling exhibit, and you can go to the USC Shoah Foundation, Dimensions in Testimony, and see how this works, see video of it, which is quite interesting. Okay, and then lastly, I wanted to talk about Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust. In thinking about the moment that we're living in 2020, this question of, we are living in unprecedented times. This is during a pandemic. And what do you do when, like I said, Holocaust testimony plays a key role in not only how American Jews remember the Holocaust, but how Americans themselves understand the Holocaust, how younger generations understand the Holocaust. So what do you do during a pandemic when you can't bring students to the Museum of Jewish Civilization, that it's on the University of Hartford's campus? What do you do then? And what do you do when Holocaust survivors who are advanced in age can't go to schools if those schools are actually open? Well, right, so I just want to highlight this exhibit, Connecticut Remembers the Holocaust, and I believe Leon is joining us tonight. We see his image and a little quotation from him. What do you do? And so I just think that this is one of hundreds, right? Don't ask me to name all the hundreds of examples, but I know that this is one of many examples of this idea, right? We've heard of the quotation, necessity is the mother of all invention. And during 2020, this time when, how do you connect students with Holocaust survivors? Well, good thing we have the internet, good thing we have Zoom, good thing we have a lot of different technologies. And I think this is one example. But like I said, this exhibit already existed in person, but the pandemic sped up the process of putting it online. So that way, it's not just individuals near the University of Hartford, but it's individuals in Connecticut. And I want to focus on this idea of Connecticut. Again, just like Harry Kulkowitz was trying to make connections with the Jews that he met during World War II, same thing, this idea that students who are living in Connecticut can say, wait a second, maybe these people could be my neighbors. Maybe I can relate to them in a way that I can't relate to someone that I don't know, and that I don't understand because we are living in different places. But right here we have people who are living in the same community. And this is a quotation that exists on the website, and I have the link down here if you would like to check it out, but I think this is really telling. We're told that as you listen to the stories of survival presented here, you too will become a witness to the experiences that are shared here. The survivors have chosen to share their memories with us in the hope that the memory of evil, the memory of righteousness, and the memory of the victims can help us engage in the act of repairing the world. As you proceed through this exhibition, think about the role you can play in sharing these memories with others. What will you remember? Why will you remember? How will you remember? And I think this focus on remembering, this idea of passing on this information to the next generation, ties together these questions about, right, this idea during a pandemic, how do you make these connections, but also the idea of using the technology that's available. So now it's not just students in Connecticut, but it's individuals throughout the US, throughout the world, who will be able to see this testimony and to use it. And I think that's the important key here, the idea of ensuring that years, decades, centuries from now, that this information will live on, and it will be a part of how Americans remember the Holocaust and a part of how American Jews understand the past. And I think with that, I will end here, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. That was wonderful. And of course, I may be a little biased that you ended with our new exhibit page, so I will. I may be a bit biased, but we're so excited about this project. Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. I know I see a lot of familiar faces here as well tonight. My name is Kimberly Bolero, and I'm the director of the Hero Center, which is this joint initiative between Voices of Hope and the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies. And this is our latest project of this partnership. And I have to say, this partnership itself is such a wonderful thing to have in our community. It has been such a wonderful experience getting to know everyone and work with everyone in the Greenberg Center, as well as work on bringing programming and unique experiences to the community, to our schools, to our students, and it is really a wonderful thing to be able to work on with everyone. So this latest endeavor together, this virtual exhibit, really has the potential to expand our outreach tremendously, and most importantly, to become an essential resource for teachers of the Holocaust and genocide. I'm so excited that Amy will be joining us very soon. It was wonderful. I was so excited when I saw that she had accepted this position after we had met in Washington, D.C. It's really just, I think, a perfect match, and we're so excited to welcome her here. So I would love to open this up to questions for Amy. Please feel free to send us questions through the chat. And we'll be working on this together. I see Seth A. I believe that's probably Seth Altman, our friend, who is starting us off here with, I was just wondering if the response or reaction of American Jewry to the Holocaust has been to remember and or memorialize, to educate the non-Jewish American population, or a little of both. So Amy, I'll let you take that.
Thanks, Seth. I think exactly right, that it's a little bit of both. The idea that American Jews, it's this interesting, they run the gamut in terms of, right, a third of world Jewry perishes during the Holocaust. And this is, for some American Jews, these are their family members. And in some cases for American Jews, these are their co-religionists that they haven't met, but they share this faith, and that bonds them. And so there is this impetus to remember the Holocaust, to write this idea of never again. But yet there's also this emphasis associated with this idea, never again will the Holocaust happen, that there's an education component. So for instance, we see in several states, and most recently in Connecticut, that there has been this push to mandate Holocaust and genocide education in schools to ensure that the youngest generations are educated. And we've all seen the polls over the past decades that ask individuals, what do you know about the Holocaust? Can you name a concentration camp or a death camp? And so I think these polls also highlight that the work isn't done, that it still needs to be taken care of in terms of making sure that individuals are educated about the Holocaust. But I will say that part of my research has been on non-Jews who have commemorated the Holocaust. And so I've done work on one organization of liberal Protestants who actually created a Holocaust memorial of planting trees as well in Israel. So again, there's this really interesting focus on individuals seeing Israel as a site of commemoration and not elsewhere, which is definitely a specific ideological statement that's being made. But nonetheless, that is a way that non-Jews as well have look to commemorate the Holocaust.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Steph. It is really interesting to see how different either how different groups of people or just groups geographically what this method is of commemoration and memorialization. And maybe in your experience in Holocaust education, so please correct me if I'm wrong. So you were living in New York and working at the College of St. Elizabeth in New Jersey, which has a very strong Holocaust education mandate. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you see school districts commemorating. Is commemoration really part of the educational curriculum there? Is it something that is active? Is it something that is more passive memory, passive commemoration? What would you say to that?
Well, so I want to call out Seth here, and he's not a plant. He just found out about this program yesterday, but I mention him because we worked together actually on creating Holocaust teacher education programs for educators in New Jersey. And this idea, I would say that it's a mixture. And one of the things, and I think that this has been a discussion about the mandate in Connecticut as well, is how do you have uniformity in what's being taught, right? You have a mandate, but how do you ensure that this mandate is followed, and who is ensuring that the curriculum is standard across the board? And I think that is one of the concerns that educators have, that it does depend on who the educator is on the school district. But I think that is where school districts and centers like the one that is affiliated with New Jersey, like the Greenberg Center, like the Hero Center, come into play, that they can take on that role. That we know that teachers are overworked, often underpaid, and really providing them with the resources to go into a classroom and teach. So when we've had Kristallnacht commemorations, for instance. We have entire classes from various high schools come to be part of this commemoration so that they too are not just learning about the Holocaust, right? That there's this, oftentimes there's this emphasis on the people who died, how they died. And I think there's something to be said for also how people lived and how they continue to live. That there's a reason why at these Kristallnacht commemorations that we have survivors. The fact that we can still have survivors and hear from their experiences is really important. So I do think that in some ways it depends, but my hope is that for more and more people to be involved in the active commemoration so that they can take it on. And just like the individuals I mentioned, that this becomes a part of their story too.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have a couple of questions here. Dean Catherine Black, hello Dean. She asks, where was the origin of those who denied the existence of the Holocaust and how did that impact American Jews?
Oh, that's a big question. So in terms of the origin, I'm not sure I can necessarily pinpoint a specific time period, but we can go even before World War II to individuals in the United States. Father Charles Coughlin, for instance, is spouting anti-Semitism. He has a national radio platform, and he is or Henry Ford Sr., for instance, publishing the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and disseminating this information. So there's already, and again, this I'm specifically talking about in the United States, but this exists beyond the borders of the US, where even before World War II, well before World War II, that there are these ideas that are resonating about Jews, and I would say questions about Holocaust denial. And when it comes to denial of the Holocaust, that is not unique to genocide, right? We know that there are other forms of denial of genocide. The Armenian genocide is one example where to this day, there are certain countries and individuals who say that that didn't happen, right? So this form of denialism is, right, that's part of these 10 stages of genocide. That's part of this idea of trying to say it didn't happen, right? But we have the evidence. So I would say, in terms of the origins, that's a big question that I'm not sure I can answer right now. But in terms of how it impacted American Jews, I would say American Jews continued their efforts, that they wanted to ensure that this became a fact. And right, even in the news in the past year or two, we've had individuals of educators who have questioned whether the Holocaust was fact or fiction. And right, so this is still something in the 21st century in 2020 that is being played out. And I think in terms of what was going on in Florida with educators there, that there's a big response from American Jews to make sure that this doesn't become the norm, that this is a small fraction of individuals and that they are seen as such by the whole of the US.
Thank you, Amy. We also have a question from Avi Pat coming in about the episode of This Is Your Life that you showed us. He says that the host barely gives Hannah Block-Conner a chance to speak, but tells her what happened to her, and ends on this redemptive note of triumph over her past. Do you think this previews a tendency in the American context to seek redemptive moral lessons out of the Holocaust? And I did want to actually mention that clip to you. I highly recommend the audience to watch the entire as much of the episode as there is, to see how the host actually presents the information and how Hannah is reacting to it. But please, Amy, I'm very interested in your take on this.
So this particular episode is freely available if you just Google it. This is Your Life, Hannah Block-Kohner. It will come up. So very easy to access if you're at all interested in seeing the full 30 minutes. I would say, yeah, it's a really interesting moment, right? Because even though I was talking about how American Jews have remembered the Holocaust, in some ways, this is an example of how an American Jew is not the actor, but rather she is in the background and her life is being told to her. Right? She's surprised, she's crying at times, but she doesn't really have a say in this. So I definitely think that the way that this episode was crafted, and in some ways it is very similar to other episodes in the fact that there are a handful of times where the person who was selected knew in advance they were going to be selected, but for the most part, it was a surprise. So that was similar for Hannah as it was for other individuals. But This Is Your Life definitely saw this as a moment to be sensitive to this issue of the Holocaust. They did in subsequent years have other Holocaust survivors, and they also had someone who survived the atomic bomb blast in Japan on the program. But I think Avi, you make a really interesting point about how this clip and this show is setting up this idea, right? They're definitely crafting a story, and it's not a story about death and destruction, but it's a story about overcoming evil. And that's one particular message, right? You could definitely focus more on death and destruction, but yet, right, the anger, the guilt, but yet we see Hannah, we're told that she looks just like she's a young American woman right out of college. So this idea that they're painting this picture that maybe doesn't exist in reality, or the fact that we don't necessarily know what Hannah had experienced. We do know that she's told about different moments. Can you tell us, right, this must have been bad when the Germans approached your town? And she said, right, I didn't see it, but I can only imagine the horror. So the Holocaust is mediated not through Hannah's lens, but through the lens of the host of the show.
Okay, thank you. So we have another question from Arnold Dashevsky. He says, I am sure all of us tonight support universal Holocaust education, but is there any empirical evidence that Holocaust awareness lessens anti-Semitic and racist attitudes or behaviors?
Arnold, thank you. I think you're asking a really important question that really hits at the core of the missions of Holocaust education centers. And there's a lot of questions that Holocaust education has focused in recent years on this idea of being an upstander instead of a bystander, right? So taking the message of the Holocaust and in some ways making it more general. And I think that there's a reason for that, to try to make the Holocaust universal, and that in itself has become a question. This idea that, is this Jewish genocide? Is it something that, right, even using the word Holocaust, is that something that's specific to the genocide of Jews, or is that something that's more universal? And that's not a question that I can answer. That's a question that has been debated. But I think this is a question that, right, I would like to hope that the answer is yes, but I think this is something that still bears study to know, right, to fine tune how Holocaust education can best ensure that it is decreasing anti-Semitic and racist behaviors. And I think that is the reason why there has been so much programming. But again, I think there needs to be more research on exactly how these centers, and many of them really getting their starting in the 1990s to see how much have those efforts have succeeded. And then I think this is a specific moment where we can pivot to new endeavors if in fact we need to do that.
Thank you. And our friend Seth also sent us a link to the latest college surveys that Echoes and Reflections conducted, which is I think one of the most interesting surveys, at least recent surveys that have been done, because it was less about Holocaust knowledge, like you said earlier. Do we want students to be able to name concentration camps and dates and individuals, or do we want them to gain greater empathy, a better perspective of diversity and celebrating and embracing diversity, and this is also or both. This is this is the a question that we all work on together. So I also encourage the audience to take a look at the report of that survey. We have a question from Alan Berkowitz. U.S. Jewish leadership during the war was at times ambivalent at best to advocate for European Jewry. What role do you believe this played in post-war American Jewish and non-Jewish attitude and memory about the Holocaust?
So thank you for your question. I think that thinking about the time period in which this is taking place, the idea that, right, we know that Stephen Weiss, for instance, receives a telegram in 1942 from the World Jewish Congress in Geneva. And it's a statement that, and I always use this with my students because there's always this question, but did people know? And the answer is yes, they did. We know that by the end of 1942, the American public knew about the Holocaust. And right, this idea that Stephen Weiss receives a letter, he shares it with FDR, and the response of the government is, let's wait, let's verify. And right, there have been critics of FDR, both among the American Jewish population, the American population itself. More could have been done, and same of the American Jewish leadership. The War Refugee Board isn't founded until 1944, so well on the way to the end of the war. So this question, okay, but more could have been done, right? And there's also this question of end the war as soon as possible, and then with that, the genocide will end. And then there are other ways to look at it as end the genocide as quickly as possible and also work on ending the war. So I think this question, and this has been debated among historians, among American Jews themselves, in terms of what role did they play in rescue, in sounding the alarm about what was going on. And I think that for many communities, this was definitely, after the war, something that American Jews wanted to make sure that regardless of whatever had happened during the war, that they wanted to make sure that they played a role, right? And of course, I'm speaking in generalizations, but that they wanted to play a role in helping with the recovery efforts, helping with the rebuilding. Where are these displaced persons going to live? Right, Europe is millions of people beyond those who died in the Holocaust, but millions of people have died. Europe is in tatters, it's been bombed. How do you rebuild? And American Jews and Jewish communal organizations specifically want to be part of that.
Thank you, Amy. So Bob Fishman asks, at what age should we start Holocaust education?
Oh, Bob.
In your humble opinion.
Well, I think, and I'm going to defer to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum on this question, that I think there is a way to start at very young ages, but of course, the types of topics are going to be different. The idea that with each age level, there are, for lack of a better word, appropriate topics to discuss, and also in terms of how children develop, what questions they might ask, what they can understand. But I'll just give an example. When I was in graduate school, I interned at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. I was part of their Lipper internship program. So I trained in their exhibit and I trained to be a tour guide. So if you, when we're back in person, once I know the campus of the University of Hartford, I'll be happy to give you a tour. But what I learned from this program is that I was going into public schools in New York City with grades as early as 5th grade. And it was really amazing, the questions that students were asking, and even questions that students weren't sure if they could even say the name of Adolf Hitler. And right, so one student was very sheepish and saying, I don't know if it's a bad word, but can I ask a question, right? And so just seeing the thought processes of these students was really wonderful, but also understanding that they, especially because they have gone to the museum, and then there has been this focus of not just on how people died, but also on how they lived. I think that's an important part of this education, and all students can benefit from understanding different perspectives on how people lived. And then from there, you can, from later ages, go more in depth into what happened, why it happened more specifically, and then also to think about ways to make sure it doesn't happen again, because we know that since the Holocaust has happened, there have been other genocides.
Thank you so much, Amy. I think we'll bring the Q&A to a close at this point. I just wanted to thank you for a really wonderful presentation. And again, we are so excited for you to join us here in Hartford and to make your mark on the projects that we have going, and we're really so excited about that. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And I will turn it over to Regina for some closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Amy, for a wonderful program and for giving the Hartford community a taste of what is to come. Also, Kim, thank you so much for being a wonderful fielder of questions. And I look forward to both of you working together and all the good things that can happen through the Hero Center, and Amy, all the wonderful work we know you're going to do in the Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies students and beyond. So thank you all for coming tonight. Happy early and healthy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you at Greenberg Center programs and UConn programs in the spring semester. We're cooking up some interesting things for you. Good night.